We have time for some questions and answers for 15 minutes or so. So Maureen and Patrick, please join us up here. And we have Sean and Ben with microphones. So please keep your questions succinct. I'd also indicate if you want to ask a question but you don't get a chance because of a lack of time today or you're shy, please write your questions down on the pads on your table. Indicate to whom you want the question directed and leave your contact information. We'll make sure that that individual gets back to you with a response subsequent to today. Okay? So, who's first? Larry's going to keep it short.
I really appreciate all the direction that's been given to me this afternoon. Question is for Doug. Doug, one of the, in looking at one of the challenges going forward, and I thank you very much, I want to acknowledge the fact that I did receive the full details of the PhD study, and I'm very impressed going forward because it also includes Dr. Duncan, George Duncan, if you could stand up, George. George was helping me move forward the parameters on that with the University of Ottawa, and I can see his wisdom and experience when I looked at the devil in the detail. So moving from the aspect of soil testing, one issue that we haven't addressed is the issue of traffic, safety, and numbers of trucks. And we have worked on that here in Scugog, and I want to acknowledge another person in the room just for the community awareness. Our Road Watch Committee has been involved, and Christy, if you're here, Christy Van Kessel is chair of our Scugog Road Watch Committee. She's also part of the private sector with Miller Company, and she is a patrol safety officer who has this area, so we recognize her work. So Doug, could you comment a little bit more about truck safety management, number of trucks, what levels of government are involved and how that moves in the process as well? Because this is safety is always a paramount concern, I know, of yours and of mine. Thank you.
Well, I'll give her a whirl. With Genevar and the Ministry of Transport and with Scugog and Horlicks, we developed a route, management route, where the trucks have to travel in spring, winter, and fall. And the trucks have to be spaced by a certain time period. Only 217 trucks a day to give us a trial period coming. We've had a couple of instances basically that we've dealt with. One driver was told that one company was told the driver was never allowed to come. He was trying to pass people. And we're putting in a new truck lane as per the Ministry of Transport, working with them, with Genevar that's doing the designs, so that we can make it much more accessible and be less intrusive on the regular public. Because it's wet, we have a sweeper. We clean the road all the time, constantly trying to keep the mud off of it. We try to make the trucks go to the right as early as possible so that the traffic is not delayed, they can go around it. And we're trying to get a route so they flow. And this is all supposed to take place once Genevar and the Ministry of Transport get in with their people. I hope I answered your question. Did I, Ian? Thank you.
Hi, Bev Hendry, Scugog. This question is for Maureen. Over lunch, you said that you were involved with the Lake Ridge site when you were back with Lafarge. If you could roll back time, is there anything that Lafarge might have done differently as it was releasing the license?
A good question. Thanks, Bev. I think one of the challenges that we face as an industry is that site was finished, completely rehabilitated. We were pretty proud of the rehabilitation that was done there. The challenge comes when the property is sold. So when the property is sold, it's sold with the same zoning on it. So I think if there was one thing that I could peel back time, I could say municipalities should be keeping an eye on these sites, because there was an opportunity right then to change the zoning and ensure that if it was the wish of the municipality for there never to be any fill on that site, that the zoning could have been changed right then. So what happened is that the company moved forward. There was the existing industrial extractive zoning on the property. So, I think probably our industry, if there was some opportunities to work at a regional level to say, the municipality might be okay with these sites and not okay with these sites, I think that's something that our industry could step up and say, okay, we'd be okay with that. We could be okay with some zoning changes that restricted that fill on certain sites. So I think if we had to go back, that would be one thing that I would have been more aware of.
John O'Toole again. I have two questions, one for Patrick, and that is if you could, in a brief time as possible, describe what soil remediation means. It's a term that's thrown around, and with the microparticles sprayed on the soil, et cetera, that would be a help to the audience. Years ago, there was no solutions. Now it seems that they can remediate things, which is good. And the other one is to Maureen. Maureen, I liked your idea that the overall site or the management, whether it's the zoning part or the control of the site plan and the whole site, et cetera, probably should be watershed-based, because there are two issues. There's soil quality, and the implications for the aquifer, the water. At the end of the day, people raise more issues about the risk to the aquifer itself. So I think if it was watershed-based, the governance of it all, for issuing the permits and having oversight, whether it's for dust and noise or whatever else, working in cooperation, because they do have an implication with the water and water management to the extent under the current Conservation Act. So could you respond to those two questions? Thanks.
Sure. In terms of, obviously, soil remediation facilities have been around a long time. Generally, they've become much more popular in sort of urban type settings recently, due to the fact of a lot of soil remediation projects that used to happen in situ. So building owners and developers would treat the soils on site through injections of certain microbes, depending on what the levels of contaminants were. But due to the constraints in sort of development and the time requirements around hydrocarbons, predominantly through the gas stations, have been treated through various types of microbes. So typically the material will come in, and obviously depending on the level of contaminants and what they are, the time period could be as long as short as 5 days, as long as 3 months, depending on what the levels of contaminants are. A lot of the issues you get with especially hydrocarbons are vapors. So when you excavate the hole, you actually lose a lot of the contaminants just in the process of transporting material from the actual sort site to your remediation facility. And then as it goes through the process, random samples are taken as per certificate of approvals, and materials left after it's completed remediation.
On your issue of watershed management of this issue, we're all in. Most of our sites across the province are already actively monitoring groundwater around their sites. Some of them have 25 years worth of monitoring results already. So to use that kind of data and to look at it comprehensively across a watershed to identify areas that would be good for fill and not so good in other places certainly makes sense to me, and I don't think you wouldn't see objection from the industry. We're set up to manage that already, and possibly we pool resources and we find some better ways to do that. So.
Good afternoon. Tara Roy DiClementi. I'm from the town of East Gwillimbury. I'm a councillor there. I wonder if you might speak a little bit about, we've had some conversation this afternoon about compatibility. And I believe, Maureen, you referenced the high permeability of the Oak Ridges moraine. So we've heard it referred to as kind of a giant Brita water filter. And if we're bringing in what is considered to be clean fill by whatever criteria we end up coming up with, and yet it may be clay as opposed to not something like gravel or sand, we're effectively putting a plug into that Brita water filter. How do you, perhaps you could speak to what sorts of things that we might use, what sorts of criteria would we be using to assess the concept of compatibility in a site? I mean, this is already a complex issue, and introducing the concept of compatibility between source sites and receiving sites, I think, makes it even that much more complex. And I would welcome some comments from that. Thank you.
Is that for me, or can I duck that one to No, okay.
I'll answer it.
Well, maybe we can all take a crack at it. I think that it is a complex task, but I do think it speaks to the fact that these issues are very regional. Our industry works right across Ontario, and for all of the similarities I can tell you there's twice as many differences in all these sites. So that's where I think it speaks to municipal involvement at a very local level, but also to some provincial involvement as well. In the Cardin Plain and the city of Kawartha Lakes, very little overburden. There's an opportunity there that farming practices could in fact be more appropriate or could be more resourceful if they had soil. So identifying that is the challenge. I would maybe leave it up to Patrick and Doug to talk about how from source site to receive from source site to receiver site, how that would work. But we can create nuclear power. We should be able to create some of these things. So
Simplest problem is, one of the things is that what happened when I first got into this, there was one regulation, Part 10. Then also we needed development. They came in with the brownfields. The brownfields were brought in to be used. If you look at the synopsis of it, what its general purpose was on the first page, it says it's used for historically contaminated sites that need to be rezoned or remediated so they can be reused by the waterfront and economically, so you didn't have to expand your infrastructure. So everybody wanted to use those numbers, but they tried to use it at fresh fill. The next thing that if we come with these fill sites, there's no definition of clean fill. If you go to Ottawa, the ministry has one definition. If you go down to Guelph, they have a different definition. If you go to North Bay, they got a different definition of clean fill. If you go with the TSSA, Lord knows what they're going to come up with a definition. You know, they don't even require CFAs or insurance to do remediation. So it's a way of getting around the thing. But when you come to some of these sites, a lot of our stuff in Brighton, like a lot of our topsoil was cleaned and sold. A lot of our soil, they're growing pumpkins, corn, wheat now. We've rehabilitated 400 acres in farms that only had 5 to 6 inches of soil. Now they have a meter and a half. They're growing all kinds of crops with it. I don't have the luxury of a quarry or a landfill to take my soil. We have to clean it to non-detect. We take out the rocks. We just sold 60,000 tons of rock to go to a quarry to be recrushed. So it's total recycling. We use all of it in our soils. If they're going to bring soils, that the province of Quebec has a very good document. They look at the porosity of soil, and if you're going to bring soil to that site, it has to match. If you bring clay soil to a sandy soil, it doesn't match. You can't do it. Some other provinces have already done the wheel, and we're sitting here trying to invent the wheel. So we should take some of those documents and use them. Right? Patrick?
I've got two questions. First one for Mr. Dovigi. I'm not sure if you're able to answer this because I know that the I believe the ownership of Lake Ridge has changed, but with respect to the Lake Ridge site, I'm wondering if you could tell me who is responsible for the cleanup.
Well, we've approached the township of Scugog, and obviously the site's in the works. We have a proposal in to purchase the property, and if in fact it went through and subsequent fill permit was issued, we've agreed to do the cleanup for the township / previous owner / ministry order that exists today. And
Mr. LeBlanc, there's something I misunderstood perhaps about your presentation. You mentioned $60 a load. I'm wondering, I don't understand the economics.
I never said that.
Sorry, the Green Bank. Is the owner being paid to take dirt, or is the owner being?
What's that?
Sorry, with the Green Bank Airport, is the owner being paid to take the dirt? I'm not quite understanding it. Is it remediated soil?
No, the owner's. I don't know. The owner's sitting over there.
So maybe
I shouldn't talk for him, but if he's paying us, he must charge to take the dirt.
Okay.
Yeah, and whoever the source site has to pay all our costs when we have to go sampling. If we have to go re-drill that site because we don't agree with the phase 2, we see how they put their monitoring wells in. If their screening is below the water table and should be above the water table and screen, we don't like that. We go back and we re-drill, and basically. And we also want the samples, we want them to guarantee, as per the proper protocol, that the samples are taken at the highest concentrated area so that we're all dealing on the same plane. We don't want them to go in a corner and take a sample and look at it. That's why we look at the phase 1s and the phase 2 as required with the protocol that we set up with the City of Scugog and their engineering.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Blanc, I just had a question. So in your presentation, you were indicating about all the best management practices that you do to ensure proper soil quality. And for Greenbank, the owners are trying to be transparent. And so they are posting, your approvals of the different source sites. And they're based on the soil reports that are listed there. So what I'm wondering is, if, for example, there are quite a few times where there's a high volume of soil, like 15,000 cubic meters, and there are only 2 soil reports there. So I'm wondering, how do you reconcile that to your previous statement where you were talking about how soil testing is very inconsistent, and you can sample here in one area and it can be different from here in one area. So how do you accept 15,000 cubic meters, or in some cases there was an unknown quantity that was listed based on 2 samples?
Unknown quantity. Well, I know about the 15,000. That came from a site that had been already, that remediates the soil, had done a whole bunch of testing for the Ministry of Environment, and before that soil can be sent. So we accepted those samples. One of the things we came up with was, if we get a source site and we're dealing with one particular client that has a good relationship with us, we do all our sampling, and those ones were sent away, and part of the ministry protocol, they have to go to the ministry. That belongs, like, how do you say, you got to do with some privacy, you got to be private. Like some of the source sites we accepted, you see a number, you don't see an address, right? But if you want to see the address, you can go see Ian. Ian will have the address and the amount of samples. If they're not posted, I'll find out why they're not posted. They should be posted. Or there's a double click and it comes on. We talked about that at the last, where's Scott? We talked about that at the last thing, because what happens is to get to all the results, there's a little slot in the corner, you got to click and then they all show up. And so we dealt with that in the last caucus meeting that we had with them. So that was one thing that was brought up. And then we said, oh no, they're all there. You just got to click into this. I remember now. So we're going to get rid of that click so they appear. So they're all there. And that makes it the transparency, because we understand we're just getting it going. So we got, like any computer program, what goes in has to come out. So that's one of the things. And we're trying to get the source site's name posted. But the thing is, there's still that privacy we got to deal with. Some sites that are refused don't want their names to appear, that we refuse the sites, and they end up by going somewhere else. So we have to deal with that privacy also.
Last question.
Yeah, hi, Phil Craig, Town of Georgina. I just want to go back to a question that Josh was asking about money. This is from Ms. Miller. You referenced $75 a truck, and one of the issues that we've had looking at a possible situation we have with a local airport is that we're hearing figures of $400 to $500 per truck, and that we're up against a lot of money paying for legal bills. So could you clarify the sort of truckload costing?
All I can tell you is what I've been advised of by our members in terms of an industry standard. I would say that there are very few truckloads of material, and when we say truckloads, we're not, I'm not going to get into the detail of a triaxle or a belly dump or a tandem, many different configurations of trucks, but $100 is a going rate for a load. Now, having said that, if you go to Ottawa, there'll be a different price. If you go to North Bay, there'll be a different price. So this is exactly my point, is that the material, if itself, there's only $100 a load, and it costs arguably $500 to do a full suite of Table 1 testing on each load, then there's not enough money in the system to make this work. And when there's not enough money in the system to make it work, then everybody's not going to be straightforward and upfront about how that testing gets done. So I don't know about materials that are not going into licensed pits or quarries. The only information I have is what I'm being told by our members, which is a going rate. So.
And that's where I thought you might go into unlicensed pits. So that's a problem area for some.
Yeah. So do I know what a practitioner that has a 100-acre property that isn't a pit or a quarry is accepting, Phil? I'm sorry, I really don't know what that number is. Maybe there's others here that can answer that, but I can only tell you what I'm being told by our members.
I know that to treat soil correctly it costs about $27 a ton for fuel oil gasoline at about an 80,000 part per million range. And if you're higher than that, it costs probably about $34 a ton. We charge between $32 and $46 a ton to treat it. So you can understand, so if they bring a truckload in, it's between $1,000 to $1,500 a truckload. So you can understand the thing when you're doing development, if they can sneak it through one of these gravel pits for $75 a load, there's a great savings.
Okay, hang on. This is not.
It was going so well.
Well, I'm not here to have a debate with you about that, Doug, but I don't think it's being snuck anywhere. What I'm saying to you is that the price, the costs of that are being borne by the owner of the material. So what, is that the pit or quarry operator that's owning that? All I'm telling you is that that's what the going rate going.
Well, if you do an EPA 625, 624, full organic sweep and inorganic sweep, you're looking at about $1,500. Then you're doing your PEHs F1 to F4, and then you're looking at about another $180. So you're looking quite expensive when you do the full sweep and look for everything. It's very expensive.
But this is.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, you should be. That was
apologize.
really rude.
In the GTA, depending on distance from, obviously where the material's being, it's anywhere between $50 and $100 a load for a triaxle load.
Okay,
So
there you go, my friend.
for clean fill.
We're going to become good friends.
Okay, I got 10 loads.
If you don't kill me.
Okay, we're going outside.
We'll run an auction here. Everything's good, and
I know you would be.
I want to thank this panel personally. 2 years ago, I was introduced to commercial fill. Citizens were mad at me. The industry were mad at me. My council was wondering what we're going to do. I was part of that confusion group. Our staff were buried in this process, and we're out on the edge. We didn't know what to do. We had a lot of advice, because advice, like truckloads, advice is free. But with that, I want to thank Maureen personally because she attended the Countryside Mayors and a couple other sessions that I attended, and she really, we interacted individually on how the aggregate businesses, and she provided me great education, and I thank you for that. During the heat of the Tale of Two Airports, version 1, I had a chance to meet Patrick, and he invited me down to his site to show me remediation. I took elected officials, John O'Toole, our MPP, attended, and staff, from KRCA. And with that, I asked to extend that visit a second time to citizens, and and Carmela and her team, and many other individuals, and they had a chance to witness the site, to speak to scientists, and try to understand the process. And I thank you personally for that. You didn't have to do that. It was a gesture of goodwill and to create a better understanding. Mr. LeBlanc, Steve was here just a minute ago. I shed my boogeyman reputation when he didn't put me on my picture on the list, and you turned around and got me all there that we grilled you. We won't apologize for that, because we do take this serious, and I appreciate you attending council. And not only that, Doug hosted another public meeting, which was very grilling as well, because people want to know, because of the fear and the uncertainty and this growing business. And not once did any of these individuals say we can't be bothered, up until even volunteering to come and speak today. So on behalf of everyone here and myself personally, I want to thank you for bringing some clarity to this complicated business. And I look forward to working with all of you to work on resolving many of these issues. Thank you very much.